You're standing in Dallas, Texas on a bright Friday afternoon. The crowd is smiling, the streets are packed, people are leaning out of windows, waving from sidewalks, craning their necks just to catch one glimpse of the president. And then the car turns. A few seconds later, everything changes. But here's the part that still makes people uncomfortable. The final 24 hours before JFK was taken out did not look like chaos. It looked organized, scheduled, smiling, controlled. The danger wasn't hiding in some dark alley, it was sitting inside the plan. On November 21st, 1963, President John F. Kennedy arrived in Texas with a mission that sounded simple on paper. Shake hands, give speeches, calm party tensions, and prepare for 1964. But Texas was not just another campaign stop, it was political territory filled with landmines. The Democratic Party in Texas was split between powerful conservative forces and Kennedy loyalists. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was from Texas, but even that did not guarantee unity. Kennedy needed the state. He needed donors, he needed headlines, and he needed to prove he could walk into unfriendly territory and come out stronger. So the trip was designed like a public victory lap. San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, Dallas, Austin, 5 cities, 2 days, maximum visibility. The message was clear, JFK was not hiding from his critics. But visibility has a price because every handshake, every speech, every open motorcade created one more vulnerable moment. And Dallas was the stop everyone kept talking about. By late 1963, Dallas had a reputation. It was wealthy, conservative, loud, and deeply hostile toward Kennedy in certain circles. Only weeks earlier, Adlai Stevenson, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, had been heckled and physically confronted in Dallas after speaking there. That incident sent a signal. This city could get ugly fast. Kennedy knew it. His team knew it. The Secret Service knew Dallas was politically tense, but presidents do not win by looking afraid. And Kennedy had built part of his image around confidence. The young president, the war hero, the charming leader who could walk into any room and own it. So when the Dallas visit stayed on the schedule, the decision carried a quiet gamble. The president would not just pass through Dallas, he would be seen. The motorcade would roll through downtown streets. The crowds would get close. The cameras would capture the moment, and the car would be open. That detail feels almost impossible now. An open-top limousine, no armored bubble, no shield from buildings, no serious barrier between JFK and the city around him. To the public, it looked warm and presidential. To history, it looks like the first block being pulled from the tower. But the most dangerous part was not the car, it was the route. The Dallas motorcade route was supposed to carry Kennedy from Love Field through downtown Dallas and then to the Trade Mart, where he was scheduled to speak at a luncheon. On paper, it was a normal civic parade route. In real life, it created something far more dangerous. The car would move through streets lined with tall buildings. It would slow through turns. It would pass directly beneath windows that had not been locked down with the kind of force people might expect today. And then came Dealey Plaza. To reach the Stemmons Freeway, the motorcade had to turn from Main Street onto Houston Street, then make a sharp left onto Elm Street. That left turn mattered. It slowed the limousine, it placed the president in a vulnerable position, and it brought the car directly in front of the Texas School Book Depository. The name sounds ordinary, almost boring. A warehouse, a workplace, stacks of boxes, men filling orders, nothing that screams danger. But inside that building was a 6th floor with a view over Elm Street, and by the next day, that view would become one of the most analyzed spaces in American history. The route had created the geometry. The city had created the atmosphere, and now one employee inside that building was about to become the center of the storm. The Dallas motorcade route was supposed to carry Kennedy from Love Field through downtown Dallas and then to the Trade Mart, where he was scheduled to speak at a luncheon. On paper, it was a normal civic parade route. In real life, it created something far more dangerous. The car would move through streets lined with tall buildings. It would slow through turns. It would pass directly beneath windows that had not been locked down with the kind of force people might expect today. And then came Dealey Plaza. To reach the Stemmons Freeway, the motorcade had to turn from Main Street onto Houston Street, then make a sharp left onto Elm Street. That left turn mattered. It slowed the limousine, it placed the president in a vulnerable position, and it brought the car directly in front of the Texas School Book Depository. The name sounds ordinary, almost boring. A warehouse, a workplace, stacks of boxes, men filling orders, nothing that screams danger. But inside that building was a 6th floor with a view over Elm Street, and by the next day, that view would become one of the most analyzed spaces in American history. The route had created the geometry. The city had created the atmosphere, and now one employee inside that building was about to become the center of the storm. Lee Harvey Oswald was not some stranger who had to sneak into the story at the last second. He was already there. He worked at the Texas School Book Depository as a temporary employee. He had access to the building. He knew the layout. He knew the floors. He knew the routine. And on November 21st, the day before JFK was taken out, Oswald's movements became part of the mystery. That evening, he went to Irving, Texas, where his wife Marina was staying. According to later testimony, this was unusual because he normally visited on weekends, not Thursday nights. The official story says he carried a long package the next morning, claiming it contained curtain rods. Curtain rods. That phrase would become one of those tiny details people argue about for decades, because in a case this massive, even the smallest object becomes suspicious. Was it really curtain rods? Was it the rifle? Was the package big enough? Were witnesses remembering correctly? This is where the JFK story begins to split into two tracks. On one track, you have the official case building around Oswald. On the other, you have the doubts that never stop multiplying. But on the night of November 21st, none of that had exploded yet. Kennedy was still alive. Dallas was still preparing, and the final morning was about to begin like nothing was wrong. The morning of November 22nd started in Fort Worth. It had rained earlier, but the weather began clearing. Kennedy stepped outside to greet a crowd gathered in a parking lot near his hotel. No heavy doom, no obvious panic, just a president doing what presidents do. He smiled, he spoke casually, he worked the crowd. Then he gave formal remarks at a breakfast event inside the Hotel Texas. Jackie Kennedy appeared with him, and the room loved her. She wore the now famous pink suit, elegant and bright, completely unaware it would become one of the most haunting images of the century. Kennedy seemed relaxed. He joked. He spoke about defense, strength, and America's role in the world. And this is what makes the final hours so chilling. The people around him were not acting like they were approaching a national rupture. They were running a schedule. Fort Worth was a success. The crowds were strong. The mood was good. The trip was working. Then JFK and Jackie boarded Air Force One for the short flight to Dallas. It was barely a flight at all, just a quick hop, a routine transfer, a few minutes in the air between one political event and the next. But when the plane landed at Love Field, the clock was no longer moving in hours. It was moving in minutes. At Dallas Love Field, the crowd was bigger and warmer than some people expected. This mattered, because Dallas had been painted as hostile territory, but the airport scene looked almost welcoming. People cheered. Jackie received flowers. Kennedy moved toward the fence line, shaking hands. For a moment, the warning signs seemed overblown. Maybe Dallas would behave. Maybe the trip would end as a political win. Maybe all the tension was just noise. That illusion lasted just long enough to become tragic. The presidential limousine was waiting. Kennedy sat in the back on the right. Jackie sat beside him. Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie sat in front of them. The bubble top was not used. The car rolled out. Crowds lined the route. People stood 10 deep in some places. Workers watched from windows. The motorcade moved through Dallas with the kind of slow confidence that made Kennedy visible from almost every angle. And inside the car, the mood reportedly stayed upbeat. Nellie Connally would later recall turning to Kennedy and saying, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." It was a perfect line. Almost too perfect. Because moments later, the motorcade approached Dealey Plaza. The car turned from Maine onto Houston, then from Houston onto Elm. The limousine slowed. The Texas School Book Depository was now behind and above them. And then the first sound cracked through the plaza. At approximately 12:30 p.m., shots rang out. At first, some people thought it was a firecracker. Others knew immediately something was wrong. Governor Connally was hit. Kennedy was hit. The limousine surged toward Parkland Memorial Hospital, but the damage had already been done. The official investigation would later conclude that the shots came from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, from a rifle tied to Oswald. Witnesses, evidence, bullet fragments, cartridge cases, fingerprints, the rifle, all of it became part of the official case. But Dealey Plaza did not just produce evidence. It produced doubt. Some witnesses thought shots came from the grassy knoll. Others disagreed. People argued over timing, angles, echoes, reactions, wounds, photos, films, and testimony. The Warren Commission concluded Oswald acted alone. Years later, the House Select Committee on Assassinations suggested Kennedy was probably taken out as the result of a conspiracy, largely because of disputed acoustic evidence. Then later, experts challenged that same evidence. So the story did not close, it widened. The more America investigated, the more people argued. And that is why the JFK case never became just a solved crime in the public imagination. It became a mirror. If you trusted the government, the official story had structure. If you didn't, every inconsistency looked like a door someone forgot to lock. And then came the final twist. Oswald would never stand trial. After the shots, JFK was rushed to Parkland Hospital. Doctors tried to save him, but at 1 p.m., John F. Kennedy was pronounced gone. A little over an hour later, Lyndon B. Johnson stood aboard Air Force One, hand raised, taking the oath of office. Jackie Kennedy stood beside him, still wearing the pink suit. That image became the transfer of power in its most brutal form. No ceremony, no celebration, just shock, blood, and constitutional machinery moving forward because it had to. Meanwhile, Oswald was arrested after the fatal encounter with Officer J.D. Tippit and was soon accused of taking out the president. Then, 2 days later, before the country could hear him defend himself in court, Oswald was taken out on live television by Jack Ruby. And with that, the case changed forever. Because when the accused man is silenced before trial, suspicion does not shrink, it grows teeth. The final 24 hours before JFK was taken out were not just about one motorcade, one building, or one suspect. They were about decisions stacking on top of decisions. A politically risky trip, a hostile city, an open car, a slow turn, a building with a clear view, a suspect already inside, a nation watching its confidence collapse in real time. And the question still hangs over Dealey Plaza like smoke that never fully clears. Was this a catastrophic security failure carried out by one man? Was there something larger hiding behind the official story? Or is the most uncomfortable answer that history sometimes changes because a chain of ordinary decisions creates one perfect disaster? Pick a side in the comments: lone actor, larger plot, or permanent mystery.